Welcome everyone to my favorite time of the week. It's the Old-Timers comic book show where the hosts aren't old, but the comics most certainly are. Joining me as always, are a couple of old-timers, best friends, colleagues, time zone aficionados. It's the professor
Hey,
and,
Johnny.
hey, and wishing there was only 13 hours in the day. It's the Crusader. Crusader.
Yo, what's up? That would be the day.
Yeah. 13 hours, yeah. Every minute lasts, everything's 13. 13
Hmm.
seconds in a minute, 13 minutes in an hour.
Mhm.
Yes, that would be ideal.
That's not going to work anytime soon. All right, so we're taking a bit of a break from Marvel and DC this time around. I'm not sure if it was intentional, but that's just kind of how it worked.
Yeah.
Our theme for this week is TV tie-ins, and when I cast my mind around, because you guys were saying I can't have this book, I can't have that book, I can't do this one, um, it dawned on me that a lot of indie books started out as tie-in books. I mean, Gold Key back in the day for Star Trek,
Yeah.
Dark Horse, now Innovation, all these different. Why is it, do you think, that independent comics back then were so heavily into the idea of a tie-in?
Built-in audience.
You think that's the only reason, really, isn't it? To be
Yep.
honest, yeah.
Yep. Yep. You're banking on the fans of whatever media that you're trying to exploit follow you. Exploit maybe might have been a bad word,
I was going
but
to say that's a bit of a harsh word.
yeah, but I mean, you're banking on the fans following, right? So
Right.
you think that some of the books that we're talking about today, it's almost like a natural kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there are plenty of them out there that you would think that what the heck are these people doing in comics?
Mm.
We've done it before. That's why it was tough to pick these books, because we were like, oh well, we've already done Gold Key, Star Trek.
Yeah, that was my shout. Yeah,
We already did like toy tie-ins like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and
yeah.
other books that have already been on TV. We've done Star Wars. We've done
Yeah.
we've done tons of stuff. So it was tough to we're actually kind of taking deep cuts.
Yeah,
A couple of them.
that's a good shout. That's a good
Yeah.
shout. 13th, back in the day, were you a TV tie-in kind of guy, or were you just all about the superheroes?
I dabbled in both, obviously, so I didn't mind it. I think your earlier question to the professor with the why indie comics,
Mm-hmm.
I think could be a cost thing as well, right? Because um it may be easier to get a better rate with an indie comic company and who may be more dedicated to whatever they're licensing out.
Yeah.
Mm.
So
I,
I
I
think there's
suppose
that.
I suppose it works how much you're charging for the license in the first place.
Hmm.
It's got to like I think one of the issues that comes up later in the show will be a cost element, because I think
Hmm.
one of the publishers we're talking about today, I think the quality of their books, the first issue notwithstanding, was absolutely par excellence. I remember my first wife was into a particular series that they produced, and absolutely the book read brilliantly. It looked great. First time one of the earlier publishers used digital coloring. It absolutely as a model, they were great, and then just up and disappeared. It was unbelievable how quick they went.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So you kind of gotta. I think the cost of the product to buy into license,
Yeah.
and also I think I think you're right, Professor. I think there is an element of um, getting the fans to buy into whatever it is.
Yeah.
The question, therefore, to you both is: do some of these still have the fan base to warrant them? Because I
That's a
mean,
good question. I don't think so.
well, I know it's normally outside of our remit, but just look how many times Transformers has been shipped around to different publishers.
Yeah.
Rom has been around the block.
I think some of these, especially toy lines and everything, they have that element
Mm.
of nostalgia
Uh-huh.
where every 20 years or something, you see that recycle of the next generation where that the ones that grew up on the cartoon, then they grew up on the toys, and then they grew up on the movies, and then and it's that never ending cycle. And some of the books that we're talking about today kind of died on the vine, and some of and when you look at the movie that was remade from your pick, almost nothing like the TV show. So some of it didn't stay faithful to the original, or maybe lost a bit of the fan base and the so it is very interesting. I like where we're going today. So it's
cool. It's an interesting change of pace, I always think.
Oh yeah,
take a walk on the TV tie side,
and to read things I haven't read before. So
I think that with some of these things, that the company that owns the license, they got to make money somehow. So they got to be able to throw this out there and resurrect the idea, maybe perhaps for new generations. So I get that part, but one thing's for sure, I agree with Bud that the interest level is not where it used to be many years ago in some of these cases. I think it's still there. I think there's a pulse, but not like it used to be.
I think streaming probably has a lot to do with that. You can go on any streaming site now and get the old episodes of whatever it is you like to watch, and then you don't need anything thereafter.
Some of it I'm kind of like, can you?
Well,
maybe you'd have to look for some of this stuff though.
Well, we'll see. Should we get involved then, gentlemen? Should we get the first book up? All right. So I've been asked to play a certain intro. So thank you to the 13th Crusader who has supplied this. Here we go. Where is it? Let me just play it from here.
Another challenge for the Green Hornet. His aide, Cato, and their rolling arsenal, the Black Beauty. On police records, a wanted criminal, the Green Hornet is really Britt Reed, owner-publisher of the Daily Sentinel. His dual identity known only to his secretary and to the district attorney. And now, to protect the rights and lives of decent citizens, rides the Green Hornet.
Wow. What?
This is a Flight of the Bumblebee, not the Hornet.
Yeah, oh my God.
That is a definite murder hornet on that thing.
Yeah, oh my. The Green Hornet, who made his TV appearance in the Batman 66 show, if you remember casting your mind back.
That was a nice little throwback, because that was is this the first intercompany crossover?
Intercompany and what? I don't know.
Green. What was Green Hornet owned by? What was Green Hornet?
They're their own company now.
Because Green Hornet wasn't made for TV. This was a comic book from back in the 30s, right?
I don't know.
Well, it was a radio show back in the 30s.
Okay. Right, let's get some stats before we get.
Crusader's going to educate us.
The 13 facts of the Green Hornet.
I'd say the birds and the bees, but
well,
it's a hornet today.
Well, my granddad used to say the birds crap on you and the bees sting you. That's what the birds and the bees are all about. All right. So we're looking at Green Hornet, number one. This is actually, I've had to do some digging around. The history of the Green Hornet comic is convoluted. This is actually a volume 2 book, whatever that means. It's from Now Comics. It's from 1989. Couldn't find it on Go Collect for love or for money, but I found it on eBay for $3. There you go. Written by Ron Fortier, Jeff Butler's on art, David Lowry is on inks. The painted colors, which is quite a nice little touch, I think, Suzanne Decknick, and letters are by Dan Necrosis, who my spell check wanted to spell so many different ways. All right. 13. Before I tell you to buzz off, tell us about this book.
Yeah, I'm going to hit you with some stingers now.
I've started it, haven't I? I have started it. Oh my God.
Yeah, that's what happens, man. I'll tell you what the buzz is all about. All right. So the Green Hornet was at first a radio series back in the 30s, and then eventually evolved into various other forms of media throughout time. As Johnny played the intro to the Green Hornet TV series, Green Hornet appeared in comics. It appeared on radio. Appeared on TV. There were some movies done about the Green Hornet. And to Johnny's point with the convolution there, the history hasn't been consistent. It seems like Green Hornet comes and goes after many years of laying dormant, and then it just comes back, and then there's some interest in it. These days, Dynamite Entertainment has a license for Green Hornet, so you can catch him there in newer stories. But for this issue in the 90s, this is the first time that Green Hornet had a comic in many years. And what I liked about it, other than the colors, I agree with you already, Johnny, on that. I liked this comic because I do own it. I remember when it came out in the newsstand. I was like, my interest from Green Hornet really came from the Batman 66 TV show, watching the reruns of that as a kid. And I was always fascinated with Bruce Lee, like many other people. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Bruce Lee is teaming up with some vigilante with Batman and Robin. And that, then my interest expanded from there. So back in the day when this came out, I'm like, yeah, I'll give this a whirl. Why not? Just learn a little bit more about the character. And what I liked about this particular issue is you get to follow the legacy, if you will, of Britt Reed, who was the Green Hornet. And in this story, it follows not just his origin story, but also that of how he met Kato and his family history, their legacy as regular citizens, why he took up the mantle of the Green Hornet, and his last case, and why it had to be his last case. And I really enjoyed this book because it just was such a great synopsis of Green Hornet. Because prior to this, it's like you knew of Green Hornet, but you didn't know about him.
That's
You
a
know
good
what I mean?
call.
And that's what I think this book really gave it a solid foundation for. Wow, that was his last case. This is a Green Hornet who's a legendary character in this world, but now the mantle is going to be passed on to his nephew. And I thought that was pretty cool. The art in here I liked a lot. And the colors, I mean, again, we say that again, I really like the colors. I think the story flowed well. At the end of the book, you're going to get a novelization of kind of like an epilogue that kind of, with Britt Reed signing off, like, hey, my nephew asked me, I want to be the Green Hornet, tell me all about it. And he was kind of enthused about that. So I like that legacy, like, passing the mantle literally within the family. And, again, Green Hornet is not some super powered vigilante. He's just a guy with a specialized gun and an extremely talented partner in Kato. And yeah, I like this story a lot. Once I started digging more into the books, I actually started appreciating the Green Hornet character a lot more whenever I see him again on old reruns on the Batman show. He had his own TV show back then. Bruce Lee made his American debut in America with the Green Hornet series. So, and the craze took off from there even more. So, Green Hornet has a place in history for sure. Not just with Bruce Lee, but also in comics and radio, TV, film, everything.
Cool.
So, I liked it.
I have to say, I really tried. But when the Green Hornet TV show came out, we were getting reruns, and the good then got another rerunning down the line somewhere else. I've tried a number of times to get to the Green Hornet, but I missed the Batman 66 sensibilities. It's just too straight for its own good, and it's kind of, for me, it's like Kato is like absolutely fantastic, and yet dude always gets beat up. Or something happens. It's like it's Bruce Lee.
I'll say this: you know how we've talked about in the past when Batman or Superman teams up with a certain character, it's to kind of bring attention to that character.
Right.
But I think in the case of the Green Hornet, trying to revive like who the Green Hornet was,
Mm-hmm.
I think it kind of it didn't help in a way, because I feel like the Batman and Robin thing kind of drowned them out a little bit,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they are also, you know, street level vigilantes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was kind of a thing like, oh, let's team up with Batman. Everyone will know
Mm-hmm.
what Green Hornet is about. Yeah, you're right. I know about Green Hornet now, but
Mm-hmm.
then the interest, right, with the TV show, because I think that's why it didn't really work out too well.
Mm-hmm.
I think Green Hornet and Batman were too similar. There was
Yeah.
just the comparison. I mean, it was the Green Hornet and Kato, Batman and Robin, the whole
Hidden base.
you know,
The
it's
whole,
like the Playboy
yeah.
thing, the bat. I mean, the Batmobile and the
Black Beauty.
Beauty. And you know, it was, to me, it was just like, okay. I mean, who ripped off from who? That's why I look back. I was like,
Okay.
when did Green Hornet come out? And I'm like, 1930. He was like 8, and I'm like,
36.
Batman came out in 38, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then I'm 30, 39. Superman was 38. Yeah. So I'm like, well, Green Hornet came first in the radio show, but I'm sure all this other stuff with like Black Beauty and, you know, the whole Kato thing. I was like, this reads like Batman and Robin without the corny villains. So
I mean, it's an interesting point, but then the Shadow predates them all. So
Mm-hmm.
it's
so
interesting.
so I mean, influences are all abound. But there is one major difference, Professor, in that Batman is a duly deputized, at least back then, duly deputized member of law enforcement, and Green Hornet was the first kind of vice cop, if you have it, because he's playing as a bad guy to infiltrate the bad guys, which was
Right.
which was quite a clever twist, I thought, for something so
Right.
so I don't know, 60s about it or whatnot.
Not all the cops were on board with Green Hornet, other than
Mm.
his boy, who was the DA.
Mm.
I just want to note here for the audience. So the story takes place between 1936 and 1945. So I think that's important because of that era. A lot of things were happening in the world, not just for comic books, but in real life. So I think that kind of plays in here too. So it kind of brings you
Okay.
back to that era of very, very early, you know, mobsters and cops and robbers, as they say.
Well, and it
You
gave some
guys.
life. It gave some life to Kato's story too, which
Right.
with the whole the Japanese concentration camps, and he actually went back during the war. Right, that was when they split up. Was right towards the end of the war, so he was actually back in Japan when they dropped the bombs. Right,
Mhm.
that's kind of the interesting little thing that they just don't. If you read the text at the end, you know, you were like, oh, interesting.
So, Professor, what did you enjoy reading this book? Was this a blast from the past for yourself, or?
Yeah, no, I never read Green Hornet before. I never really tried to get into it. Of course, I've seen the Batman 66 show. Never really saw the Green Hornet TV show that was on for one season, and that was on. And Bruce Lee died, right? That was the only reason that they canceled the show, or I can't even.
I think he died before. I think he
before
died
it aired.
after. No, I think he died way after that. To be honest,
way after. Okay, I don't know.
I
mean, I don't have the.
Let's Google it.
Let's Google it. But anyway.
Let's Google while you're talking. Keep going, and I'll research.
I can't get past the comparisons to myself from when I'm trying to read this to like a Batman issue from around the same time, like 87, 88, 89. Just I think the panel layout's kind of similar, the colors, just the art direction here seems to me, it really reminds me a lot of Batman. The thing here that I was like a little confused about is that he uses the gas gun, right, to take out the bad guys, but then there's one panel where he tells Kato to just drive through them. I'm like, what? So is he
step on the gas?
Yeah.
I was like, that seems odd, But
I have the answer for you. So here it goes. The show aired in 1966, following the success of Batman. The show lasted one season. primarily because low ratings, because he wasn't Batman. Bruce Lee died in 73. There
Right.
you go.
Okay. So I'm
So-
all right. So I was way off, but
But it's interesting because people, it depends who you ask, but people will know Bruce Lee from either Game of Death and Enter the Dragon or the Green Hornet and
Yeah.
nothing in between. And I mean, the guy was super creative. He was the guy who came up with the idea of Kung Fu, the TV show, and famously got 86 by the networks because no one will watch this TV show about an Oriental guy. Let's put David Carradine because he looks kind of Eastern in there. So allegedly, as the rumor has it.
interesting.
So,
Yeah, no, I enjoyed this book. I actually I enjoyed the story in the back more than the original story here. So it was, and I didn't know anything about Green Hornet before before I picked this book up. So yeah, it's good stuff. I liked it.
I enjoyed it. It's of its time, or at least it's trying to be of its time with the time frame of set between the war. Um, I didn't think the art was fantastic. I thought it was a little bit, wooden in places. That said, I for a Green Hornet fan, is anybody else having trouble saying green and not saying arrow or lantern after it? Or is
I
that
almost
just
said
me?
lantern a couple of times.
So it reminds me of why. In fact, I tell you what, it's a good thing to look at this book, and in fact, these books as a whole, generally, at least this one and the last one, it just shows you how far independent comics have come from having to be so like stick in the mud religious to what they're trying to talk about, and allowing for a sense of freedom. Granted, TV tie-ins have to carry a certain weight and a certain, as you say, styling of the show that they've come from. I'm not sure this carries over particularly well in this one, but if you like Green Hornet, I think you're going to get a buzz out of it for sure. And the fact that they've subsequently after this book, they made a movie and he's still getting published by, as you said, Dynamite Entertainment, shows us there are plenty of swarms of Hornet fans out there. What? That was good. That was a good one. That one.
Yeah, they are of a hive mind. What else you got?
Don't bug me. That's what I'm saying. What can I say? That's terrible. All right. Before we kill our audience off with bad jokes, let's have an advert for one of our other shows before we move into the next couple of books. Where shall we go? I tell you what, check this one out. K-Pop Cosmos. He says missing the button by about an inch. There you go. There you have it, K-Pop Cosmos with Marky Mark and Freya, the latter taking shows or doing shows in between fantastic episodes of The Definite Crusade. There you go. Cool. I saw you popping away in the background there, Professor.
Yeah, I'm still like,
you got
Night at the Roxbury. I'm all like,
you got the K-pop down, yeah?
I don't know.
I say this now, when I say this on outside the panels, I always say, to me, it just looked like dancing Power Rangers. I have no idea. So there we go.
It's
All right. Next up is probably the TV sensation of the 90s. All right. Where else could you get barbed steaks and short skirts? It is, of course, the fantastic Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Now, before everyone goes a little bit bonkers, we are looking at the Dark Horse series. And by hook or by crook, we couldn't get it. So what we're looking at here is the Boom collection of the original Dark Horse series. So if you're thinking, Machine, that's not the Dark Horse book, you're absolutely right. It's not. But still, never judge a book by its cover. We're looking at issue number 1 in this series. On eBay, you can get number 1 for around £20. A grade 9 on Go Collect has sold for $55. So, ironically, there is some life in the vampires. Who'd have thunk it?
Hey.
Written by Andy Watson, Joe Bennett's on art, Rick Ketchum is on inks, Guy Major's on colours, and letters of Janice Chan. I will say this, the creative team does change through the run, so this isn't just a one set piece. But as I mentioned, we are looking at the first issue. Right, Professor, take it away.
So when we decided to do this episode, it was, and of course we were running into like, we already talked about that book. We already talked about that book. I'm like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? And then I'm sitting there going, oh, has the Joss Whedon verse been around for 25 years? because they turned all of his stuff into comics. They did Buffy and Angel and even Firefly. I was like, all that stuff. They kind of translated into comics, and then I'm sitting there going, did it make the cutoff? Because I was really like, I didn't think it was going to be 25 plus, but turns out the Dark Horse stuff was 25 plus. So I was like, hey, I think that it matches.
It does.
Yeah. So
good result.
The cool thing about Buffy is, so Buffy actually went from being a movie made with Christy Swanson back in like 1987 to 10 years later, it was a TV show and turned into one of the biggest hits on CW at the time, or whatever network it was on. I think I'm right about CW.
It might be CW before it was CW.
Yeah, UPN was that what it was?
TNT maybe.
I don't know.
Whatever.
I don't know.
BBC Two for us Brits.
All I know is it had Sarah Michelle Gellar in it, and it quickly spun off another successful show, an Angel, and then it lasted. Was it 7 seasons?
7 seasons.
Yeah, so it was a great show at the time. Translates very well into comic books because almost every character in that show turned out to be like some kind of superhero horror type character with all kinds of stuff going on. It was interesting stuff. So I was kind of excited to say, okay, well, let's see how the comic translated. Sorry to say, the first issue didn't really bite me.
Hey,
yeah,
there was a lot at stake for this book.
Yeah, all right. I can't keep up with you.
I'm trying to hold back, guys. I'm trying to hold back.
I mean,
stop being so cryptic about it.
Yeah.
It's a grave mistake picking this book. All right, can we stop now?
You're the one that's doing it. So
I'm going to stop. I am going to stop now.
So honestly, I can barely tell you what this first issue was about, because I spent the entire time looking at the artwork and being like, oh, there's some panels that she kind of looks like Sarah Michelle Gellar, and then other panels I'm like, she kind of looks more like the other character, Allison Hannigan, kind of each other. None of the other characters, like, it was very difficult for me to keep the characters straight, even though I knew them from the TV show. So I was like, there's a guy that must be Xander. But the other 3 women, it's just the hair color. That's how I'm like, the hair color I have to keep straight. You know, it was either Willow or Buffy. And then there was a scene that Cordelia's in, but they didn't mention her by name, and I couldn't remember who it was. But I'm like, I think this is that character played by Charisma Carpenter, but doesn't look anything like her. So I'm kind of just going to guess that that's her. And then 2 pages later, they said Cordelia. And I was like, oh, yeah, that was who it was. But so it was very difficult to follow the issue. And, you know, to be honest, this is the first issue, and it was the first part of a 2-parter. I didn't read the second part to get the rest of the story. Sorry, I was done after the first issue. I'm
to not be continued.
To not, yeah. So, I mean, I would say the reason I picked this book was because I like the TV show. And I never read the comic. And now I know why. Like, why do they try to make the characters look like the actors, except for Oz? Oz should look like Seth Green, and he looks nothing like him at all. They didn't even try. So it was interesting. It brought back some memories about the characters and everything, but I don't see why anybody would have picked up the second issue after picking up the first issue.
Well, she's a leggy blonde. You know what I'm saying? I mean, the girl has legs all the way up to her armpits.
That's the 90s.
See, I said this at work when my boss and I were talking a while ago about Buffy. And I said some clip about short skirts. And she was like, yeah, it was the 90s. That's just what happened. I was like, yeah. I miss those days. Anyway, Joe Bennett, he's been around the block though, right?
He worked for Marvel. Yeah, I did Captain America and a few other things. Yeah.
It's interesting how he's gone all J. Scott Campbell or even Mark Bagley around the faces on this book. It kind of throws me off a little bit. For sure. And
it was very, very wordy too.
There is that. It doesn't, and I think this is part of the problem of, I think, the Buffy book for me is that TV tie-in books have to look like the characters. You've got to be able to see who they are. And
Correct.
For Buffy, there's a certain pace, there's a certain kinetic energy to the way that the dialogue is like. It's on like a rhythm. It's very beat specific. And when you hit the comic book, it is like blah, one tone all the way through. There's no differential on that.
Yeah.
13th, what was your take on Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
That's funny. I don't know. I never got into Buffy the show. This comic book did not help me even want to watch any of the shows. But it just made me think of how back in these days, or even older than this, right, when we were just talking about Green Hornet, times were different, media access was different. So out comes comic books to try to garner some interest for the TV show or the other way around. So by this time, everybody was watching quite a bit of TV. Buffy was popular. I'm not going to take that away, but I felt like this wasn't strong enough to kind of emulate what little I've seen of the show. I agree with Bud with the art on the Sarah Michelle Gellar part. But the one thing that bothered me the most, really, with everything is the color. If this is supposed to be a vampire book, why is it so bright?
It's because it's in Sunnydale.
Yeah, but I don't.
But by definition, it's sunny there.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough sell for me, man. It really is, and I struggled from page one. I struggled to keep interest.
There was a huge problem I had with this book, and this page just reminded me of it. So one of the subplots in this book is Xander. Xander gets tired of getting beat up all the time, so he goes to like a self-defense place and starts learning karate or kung fu or whatever.
Keto.
Yeah, and he gets punched in the face. He gets a black eye, and they talk about his eye for the entire issue, and not once in one panel at all do you see him with a black eye. Every time they draw him, it's just Xander. There's no messed up face. So you can see it right here in that top panel. There's no black eye, even though he's talking about it. And then if you turn back a few pages, you could just see, like, every time they see him, I expect at least some, like the inker. Can you just darken his eye up a little bit?
Yeah.
there's nothing there saying that he ever got hit in the face, but they talk about it every single time he's on the page. So
I
I have a problem on this page in that the panel here, in this big panel here, she's clearly got her arm facing, her right hand is facing downward. You can see her thumb. Yeah, so she's practically holding the stake like that.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm holding my arm like that. It's uncomfortable. Where's my say that? But then the next panel, you can see it's now this. It's like, come on, man, get it together. You know, it's simple things. Simple.
Johnny, it was hard to stay interested, man. And I've said this before. If because I've never really got into the series or anything like that. So if I'm walking into the shop one day and I'm like, I've heard good things about Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Oh, but it's in a comic book format. Let me give it a whirl. That's your one chance to try to to kind of get me hooked on the Buffy the Vampire stuff via a comic book format and maybe motivate me to watch the show. And this did not do that.
That's a good shout. Length of hair changes more than the length of the legs, which changes throughout. So that's bonkers. Characters kind of look where like they're supposed to. The art is a little bit frenetic in the fight scenes, which kind of mirrors the show. But the dialogue is the thing that got me. I was doing all right until I got to where was that page with all the dialogue on? The first one. Where is it? I was doing all right, so I hit the library page, and I was like, "Is that it?" I was doing all right, so I hit this page. At which point I looked at this page, I was like, "Nope, that's it. I'm done." And it's a shame because I quite like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I don't think it's aged as a show particularly well. I will say that. My wife and I recently watched a few episodes of season 1 with the intent of watching it all the way through. I didn't finish season 1. It's only 11 episodes. I was like, yeah, I'm done. No. And so it hasn't really particularly aged well for me. But interesting. Again, another character that's still getting a lot of love, still getting books produced. So out there, IDW. See, the IDW are a boom that have done the last Slayer storyline, and they've done some crazy stuff like making Willow the Slayer, and to protect Buffy and stuff like that. Which, for me, always seems like a bit of a stretch too far. Because if you're reading it because of Buffy, then if she's not the Slayer, what are you reading? But
and Buffy actually, that when they started publishing new stories, it was actually season 8, season 9. They actually translated it for a continuation from the TV show. So
agreed.
I thought that was interesting. But
that was an interesting take. But then you got from that point of kind of done all sorts of crazy stuff. So it's interesting. But if you're into Buffy, then it's going to be a win-win. If you're not into Buffy, it's going to be maybe go check out Angel. Right. Okay, the last book, which is my choice. Sorry, guys. What can I say? I don't know why I picked this book.
Because we told you couldn't take Star Trek because we
son of a. So back in the day,
I did say issue 2. Could have done issue 2.
Why was issue 2 better?
No, because you did number 1, so you could have done issue 2.
Same conversation. So I did look at the DC Star Trek number 1, which is set on the Excelsior. So I looked at that. I thought, nah, give that a miss. Written by Mike W. Barr. I was like, nah, pass that on that. Right, we're talking about innovations lost in space. This is the number 1 issue. Some innovation comics from 1991. eBay can buy this for the pricey sum of £7. Go collect, have a grade 9 at 15. That's $15. Written by Matt Thompson and Dave Campitti. Eddie Newell and Mark Jones are on art. Scott Rockwell's on colors. Vicky Williams is on letters. Now, before we get into the book, I think it's safe to say that at least on this particular book, Innovation are probably the spiritual predecessors of Zenoscope Comics.
Okay.
Yeah? Do we agree? Disagree?
I'm lost in space.
You lost to space. So Zenescope comics currently are, how can I put it?
Cheesecake.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's a nice way to say a TNA book? No, it is cheesecake. It's cheesecake. And
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with cheesecake.
We'll
Not
talk
at
all about it when we start going through this book.
However, Innovation did it first, at least with Lost in Space. Innovation company from the late 80s, early 90s had a raft of books. They had Lestat Vampire book, which was as racy as this, if not more. They had this. They had Quantum Leap, which my first wife absolutely loved. Painted covers of the characters in there that looked absolutely great. Lost in Space. So back in the day, you're either one of two fans. You either love Star Trek or you love Lost in Space. When Lost in Space was the black and white show, it was really quite serious and quite hardy, to say the least. When colour came in, that's when the talking carrots all started appearing and it all went a little bit bonkers. Suffice to say, on this book, Billy Mummy has a lot to do with it, and of course, he plays that little precocious child. Is it Will Robinson? Will, yeah.
Yes, Will.
Some sort of proto crusher there. But the book is pretty much as it is. It's lost in space. They're stuck on a planet. It's the Space Family Robinson. That is the premise of the whole series, basically. It's set after the TV show, and as such, things get a little bit cheesecakey. Penny's a little bit older. They play up the buxomness of Judy, and there's loads of different panels where model poses are in place. Story-wise, it reads like an episode of Lost in Space. Something bad happens on the planet that they're stranded on. They manage to escape and get lost in space and bring on the next things. In the meantime, as part of that, you get a rehash of the first episode of how they got there in the first place, which is interesting if you hadn't seen the TV show. So that's kind of cool. The art of the three books we've looked at, I think this one is probably the most bang on artistic wise, at least for the faces, if not some of the poses are a little bit bonkers. The colours are heavy. They don't normally particularly work brilliantly, but you know, it's what can you do? I like how faithful they are to the Jupiter spaceship, and the chariot and the robot looks great. All in all, I think if you take the cheesecake element out of it, which is a little bit off-putting towards young Penny more than anything, I think it pretty much reads well for a Lost in Space comic of the TV show from which it spawned. So I think, yeah, kind of okay, I think. Professor, you look like you're going to say something.
I couldn't get past the cheesecake. I was as I was reading this book, the first panel that they showed Judy with her tits hanging out, and I was like, "What am I looking at?" I'm like, "This is from a 1960s show. This would not get past the censors." I was like, "What are?" I'm like, and then when they had the later on the scene when Dawn is it Dawn West comes down and has this conversation with Penny in a bikini, and then when Judy comes out, I'm like, is this the precursor to a three-way porn Lost in Space scene? And I was like, this is who wrote this, and I couldn't believe what I was reading. I was like, what is this? Look at that. Look at the placement in the panels. Like, come on, Penny. How old is Penny in this? 15?
No, she's a bit older now. She's about 18, 19.
I don't know. Will still looks pretty young.
Well,
So
yeah. Bill Mummy's not going to have his one claim of fame changed, is he?
I was just like, oh, for God's sakes. And then, but you know, as far as characterizations and everything, you get Professor Smith there. Still looks like a evil professor. And they kind of have a little little thing going on with the aliens at the end of this book, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. But then, then I'm sitting there going, what do they do with the rest of the series? If this is the start, I mean, they can't draw Judy without, cleavage or, her boobs hanging out. And I hate to sound like, I'm not saying that I hated it, but I was like, oh my God, this is like, this is lost in space. These are like teen actors, and they're still using the obviously photo reference to draw the actors' faces and stuff. Do you think the female actors are happy that, who cares what she looks like? That was a nice butt shot right there. So.
Well, shall we? I'm not defending the book. It is what it is.
But when did this come out? 1989, right? Oh, 1990?
91, I think
91?
it was.
Okay.
91. So this is at the height of the whole kind of, trying to make things look great and super sexy and all that sort of stuff.
I have a little bit of trivia for you, Johnny, and not really trivia. No one knows this, but if you turn to the back of the book, there's a couple of pages written by Bill Mumy, who talked about his time on Lost in Space and the origins of this book, and he starts talking about in 1990, I think, that the convention in Boston where they had a cast reunion.
Mm-hmm.
I was there.
You were at the start of the.
I was there. I was reading that article, and I was like, "Wait a second! I remember the Lost in Space cast reunion. I remember meeting Bill Mumy there, and I remember everybody being together, minus one cast member who had died already, but everybody else was there." And I was like, "Oh, I remember," because there was the whole Lost in Space cast, and then the majority of the Babylon 5 cast was also there. And if you remember, Bill Mumy was in both shows.
Yeah.
So I thought it was very interesting. So yeah, I was there, and I think it was 1990. So.
Wow, very impressive.
Yeah.
Try to get the size right so I can get this right. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
True trivia fact for decent, wasn't it?
It was fun. It was a fun time, and that was a great panel when they had them all on stage together. It was great.
I should never move the sizes. It's all gone Pete Tong. All right, okay. 13th, what do you think of this book?
Where's Green Hornet's gas gun?
You're not allowed to gas the females of the book. You're not allowed to do that.
I'm going to start with the dialogue here, because as I was reading this, I'm like, I kind of vaguely remember, some of the show, but on reruns, of course. But when I was reading the script, there was one part where I don't even know what her name is. She's like, "Dr. Smith, could you help me make a chemical analysis of this fluid?" And I'm like, what am I reading? So the cheesecake galore, without a doubt, and innuendos as well. And then I couldn't even tell the difference between who is family or not.
Yep, that was the other thing too. I was like, who is related to who? Look at Don West taking a look at that butt.
Yeah, and then never mind being lost in space already. You know what? You deserve what you get.
Mm-hmm.
You deserve what you get. You guys are in this ship, and whatever, sabotaged by whatever his face is, whatever, man.
Smith.
Yeah, you deserve what you get.
Smith.
Stay out there. Stay out there. Leave us alone and keep your plants. That was the other thing that was weird. These alien plants, and I don't know. And then the insinuation again, if you remember from that era in time, that robots are evil, or if you program them to be evil, you watch out. Life's gonna change dramatically. So it's like Skynet before Skynet and Lost in Space. Just freaking stay out there. Leave me alone. That's my review. The colors are nice.
So basically what we're saying is, if we're the cast of Sesame Street, 13th is 13th the Grouch. That's what we're saying. Yeah.
Hey, listen, I'll take that. At least I'll be grounded to earth.
Yeah. over
Yeah,
the top.
I don't know, Johnny. Again, I'll say the same thing I said for Buffy. You know, I did as a kid, like I said, I watched a couple of Lost in Space and stuff, but I was always about Star Trek. You know,
Okay.
so now you're coming with the comic book, and it's like, okay, let me slow it down now. Maybe I didn't understand the show too much. Let me slow it down and really like dig into this. And I was just thrown off.
It's interesting because, as I said, Lost in Space went through transitions. The first season, super serious. As it got into like the color element, when you see how great Batman was, for example,
Hmm.
the zany elements would come into place and all sorts of crazy stuff would happen. There was no sort of cheesecake in the TV show. It was all very wholesome, and
Look at the
everyone would
title of
forgive.
this chapter, Johnny. Seduction of the Innocent. Like, no kidding.
Yep.
No innocence in this show, I tell you that for sure.
No.
Right, okay, there you have it then. 3 tie-in books of varying degrees of success or failure, depending on your point of view. Thing is, there are tie-in books that we love. We talk about the Star Wars books. We talk about some of the later Star Trek books from DC. A whole host of different things that we like. Dark Horse themselves made a massive. That's how they got into the business, isn't it? Tie-ins with Alien versus
Alien,
Predator.
Predator, yeah.
Yeah. Before,
Tops Comics did X-Files, and we
yeah,
talked about that before.
yeah. The Dracula adaptation with Mike Mignola.
Yep.
So yeah, tie-ins can work. Tie-ins can work. I'm not sure the ones we picked today particularly work, but you know, what are you gonna
It
do?
was, and I had mentioned before about like, we've talked about like real life characters being in comics, and that was like one of those things like we could have talked about the Saturday Night Live cast being in that Marvel team up issue, or Don Rickles showing up in Jimmy Olsen, or Jerry Lewis that had his own comic book, so it's like interesting stuff that you're not sure,
Yeah,
wouldn't
it's kind of,
translate to today.
yeah, it's like the slice of life that just doesn't exist anymore.
I'm
is it?
surprised
So,
Jim Carrey never had a comic book.
well, you could maybe you could argue that Batman Forever is a Jim Carrey book, but that's a tie again, I guess.
I thought The Mask was made into a comic, or am I
It
imagining that?
was.
The Mask,
Well,
the Mask
was a comic first.
made into a movie.
Yeah.
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 Same with Men in Black,
Mhm.
Road to Perdition.
Yeah.
Time Cop was a comic book before it was a Jean-Claude Van Damme killer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we talk about, it's funny because we talk about like comic book and superhero movies. We always think about like the Marvel and DC ones. We forget that the independents were out making movies way before
Well,
Marvel and DC.
everything now you have to kind of go back and say, where did this appear first? Like Netflix, the Millarverse, they have like Jupiter Ascending and all that stuff. So there's all kinds of stuff out there now that was in comics first. So.
Good call. Right. Okay. 3 up, 3 down. Done for another week. We will be back in a fortnight with another theme and another grouchy Crusader.
He'll have had enough sleep next week.
Yeah, maybe. I doubt it. So all that's left really for me to say is, Professor, thank you for spending the time.
Thank you, Johnny.
13, thank you for the input as always.
Of course.
Don't forget to check out the UCPM for all your favorite shows, including Professor.
No Prize Podcast, all about the MCU, Disney Plus, and we throw in some comics somewhere in varying degrees of success.
Yeah. Watch out for that 7-inning stretch. 13.
Don't forget to check out the Definitive Crusade, where we talk about all the current DC comic books that are not Lost in Space.
There you go. And of course, don't forget to check out Outside the Panels for the interview show with creators, writers, Kickstarters. The whole gauntlet is on there. That will be back in a week or so. So check that out. Excellent. Okay, gentlemen, I've been your host, Johnny Machine Hughes, and as always, adios.